When you picture a Roman gladiator, massive Hollywood summer blockbusters usually portray an arena of ruthless, endless slaughter. You probably imagine a wildly savage spectacle where desperate men fight violently to entertain a completely bloodthirsty crowd. But what if absolutely everything those glittering movie screens taught you about this ancient profession was entirely fabricated? The hidden truth buried beneath the blood-stained Roman sand reveals a highly calculated business driven by strict rules. You are about to discover why these ancient warriors fought strictly for survival instead of mindless cinematic glory. You are 25 years old, living in a quiet provincial town far from the bustling capital. Life has not been kind to you, and the heavy weight of crushing debt feels absolutely suffocating. It feels exactly like a modern college graduate drowning in massive student loans with no escape. Every single day, greedy creditors knock on your wooden door, demanding payments you simply cannot afford. The mounting interest acts like predatory credit card debt, steadily ruining your once peaceful and simple existence. You desperately need a reliable way out before your entire family is thrown onto the cold streets. Unlike the tragic tales often told in history books, you were never captured as a foreign slave. You are actually a free Roman citizen, but poverty has a cruel way of stripping away your freedom. Desperation forces you to make a terrifying choice that most ordinary people would never even dare consider. You decide to walk toward the grim training school, preparing to sign away your own physical body. This decision makes you an octoratus, a free man who willingly volunteers for the brutal gladiator arena. It is the ultimate sacrifice, trading your personal liberty for a chance to finally clear your debts. When you step inside the dusty ludus, the thick smell of sweat and leather fills your lungs. A wealthy lanista, the powerful manager of this brutal franchise, sits behind a heavy wooden desk, waiting. He looks at you with cold, calculating eyes, assessing your physical worth like a piece of merchandise. This man does not care about your personal struggles or the hungry family waiting for you back home. He only sees another potential asset to boost his massive entertainment empire during the upcoming seasonal games. He slides a rough parchment across the table, presenting terms that look suspiciously like an exploitative corporate contract. You slowly read the harsh words, realizing you must agree to endure fire, chains, and deadly iron weapons. By signing this document, you surrender all your basic civil rights to become property of the training school. It is a legally binding agreement that strips away your humanity until your final financial obligation is met. Your signature means the lanista can legally punish, beat, or even kill you if you disobey his strict orders. Despite the terrifying conditions, the promised signing bonus is enough to immediately pay off all your aggressive creditors. You take a deep breath, picking up the dark ink to permanently bind yourself to this dangerous corporate machine. Here is where it gets interesting, because your new life is nothing like you initially expected it to be. Instead of being thrown straight into a bloody arena, you are assigned to a highly structured training program. The organization operates much like a massive modern sports franchise, protecting its extremely valuable financial investments. You are given a clean sleeping cell, and surprisingly, the strict living conditions are better than your slum. They need you healthy and strong, because a weak gladiator generates absolutely no profit for the greedy owners. You quickly realize that this institution values your physical maintenance simply to ensure maximum return on their investment. Every single night, you stare at the stone ceiling, wondering if selling your soul was truly worth it. The heavy reality of the contract presses down on your chest, reminding you of the deadly path ahead. Yet the comforting thought of your family living without the constant fear of starvation gives you immense strength. You have willingly transformed yourself into a corporate asset, a fighting machine designed to entertain a massive crowd. This rigorous training camp is now your entire world, isolating you entirely from the chaotic society outside these walls. You must survive this grueling corporate ladder, because failure in this specific business literally means losing your life. Your former life in the quiet province now feels like a distant dream, fading away into the dark shadows. You have traded the suffocating anxiety of endless debt for the terrifying physical reality of the bloody sand. Tomorrow brings another exhausting day of relentless drills under the harsh sun and the screaming voice of your trainer. But tonight, you must rest your aching muscles and mentally prepare for the violent reality of your chosen profession. The legally binding ink on that harsh contract has sealed your fate within this brutal ancient sports monopoly. You close your tired eyes, knowing there is absolutely no turning back from the dangerous commitment you just made. The life of an octoratus is a strange gamble between total destruction and the ultimate promise of financial freedom. You just hope your physical strength will outlast the incredibly cruel demands of this unforgiving ancient business model. The heavy iron door firmly locks behind you, leaving you entirely alone within the damp, suffocating darkness of your cramped stone training cell. A cold, aggressive draft slowly creeps through the narrow iron grate, carrying the unmistakable sour scent of stale sweat and old wood smoke. You sit quietly on the rough hay mattress, feeling the chilling dampness seeping deeply into your exhausted and terribly bruised, aching bones. Now listen carefully, because the hidden symphony of this ancient night reveals the true psychological weight of your terrifying new reality. The absolute silence of the vast training school is occasionally broken by the lonely, haunting whistle of the midnight wind blowing outside. Somewhere far down the seemingly endless stone corridor, you can faintly hear the restless tossing and turning of another desperately anxious fighter. Your rough, calloused hands slowly reach for the simple earthenware bowl, resting quietly on the uneven surface of the cold stone floor. You slowly drag a dull wooden spoon across the bottom of the rough bowl, creating a rhythmic, hollow scraping sound in the darkness. The thick, tasteless gruel provides absolutely no momentary comfort, yet you force yourself to swallow every single bite to maintain your vital strength. The sticky texture of the mashed grains heavily coats the roof of your dry mouth, tasting mostly of burnt ash and bitter earth. This modest nighttime ritual feels strangely grounding, momentarily distracting your racing mind from the terrifying reality of tomorrow's brutal entertainment spectacle. The rhythmic scraping of the wooden spoon echoing in the tiny room becomes a surprisingly soothing, almost hypnotic melody, lulling your exhausted senses. When the empty bowl is finally pushed aside, your trembling fingers gently trace the familiar, worn contours of a tiny carved wooden statue. You spent countless lonely nights painstakingly whittling this small piece of discarded pine into the delicate, loving likeness of your beautiful, distant wife. Her imagined presence in this dark, unforgiving cell brings a sudden, overwhelming wave of profound sadness mixed with incredibly fierce, protective determination. You gently press the smooth, polished wood against your scarred cheek, desperate to remember the soft, comforting warmth of her gentle morning embrace. The faint, lingering scent of dry pine needles instantly transports your weary soul far away from these suffocating walls and looming bloody sands. Holding this small reminder of home gives you a profound sense of peaceful purpose before the incredibly violent storm of tomorrow finally arrives. As the flickering yellow light of the distant torch slowly dies out completely, the heavy shadows stretch out and completely swallow your tiny stone sanctuary. You carefully tuck the precious wooden carving beneath your rough woolen blanket, ensuring it rests safely and warmly right next to your loudly beating heart. Your tired eyes finally close heavily, surrendering entirely to the deep, peaceful exhaustion that naturally follows a brutal day of relentless physical punishment. The terrifying anxieties regarding tomorrow's deadly arena combat slowly melt away into the incredibly quiet, protective embrace of this deeply restorative midnight stillness. This momentary illusion of perfect safety wraps around your tired mind like a warm cloak, shielding you from the harsh reality waiting just outside. You drift gently into a deep, dreamless slumber, floating peacefully in that incredibly beautiful, fleeting space existing right between the painful past and the uncertain future. Morning comes, bringing a stark reality that completely shatters another popular cinematic illusion you once held dear. Modern movies always portray ancient warriors with heavily chiseled chests and perfectly sculpted six-pack abdominal muscles glistening with sweat. You might naturally expect your rigorous training camp to feed you massive quantities of raw meat to build pure muscle. Instead, the kitchen staff hands you another large, overflowing bowl of extremely bland, heavily boiled grains and crushed legumes. You look down at the unappetizing mixture, wondering how this simple peasant food could possibly sustain a fierce warrior. What exactly do you eat every day to become an incredibly efficient killing machine? The surprising answer lies not in rare, expensive proteins, but in the cheapest, most abundant crops available in Rome. In the brutal world of the Roman arena, you and your fellow fighters are actually mocked as the hordearii. This mildly insulting Latin term literally translates to the barley men, reflecting the heavily plant-based diet you consume daily. Your daily rations consist almost entirely of coarse barley, boiled beans, tough oatmeal, and occasional handfuls of dried fruit. Meat is an incredibly rare luxury, strictly reserved for special festive occasions or given to recovering wounded veterans. You consume massive amounts of these simple carbohydrates, washing them down with a bitter drink made of harsh vinegar. This special tonic, known as posca, is mixed with local wood ash to heavily fortify your severely depleted calcium levels. The strict trainers meticulously monitor your food intake, ensuring you consume enough calories to develop a very specific physique. This heavy carbohydrate diet is completely intentional, designed specifically to build a thick, protective layer of subcutaneous body fat. You are not striving to look like a modern fitness model or a lean, aesthetically pleasing sculpted marble statue. Instead, you are slowly transforming your body to closely resemble a massive NFL offensive lineman or a heavyweight sumo wrestler. Those enormous modern athletes intentionally carry extra weight to anchor their power and absorb massive, bone-crushing physical impacts during games. In the blood-soaked sand of the amphitheater, that extra layer of soft padding serves a deeply practical, life-saving purpose. When a sharp gladius slashes across your exposed stomach, the thick fat effectively catches the blade before it reaches vital organs. It is a biological armor system that perfectly allows for spectacular bloody flesh wounds without causing instant catastrophic death. This calculated physical transformation perfectly aligns with the incredibly strict business model operated by your wealthy, profit-driven lanista. The roaring crowds absolutely demand to see thrilling violence, bright red blood, and dramatic, agonizing pain during the afternoon spectacles. However, the greedy investors definitely do not want their highly expensive, extensively trained human assets dying from minor, superficial cuts. A lean, heavily muscled fighter with zero body fat would instantly suffer catastrophic internal damage from a simple, shallow slash. By maintaining a bulky, heavily padded physique, you can sustain numerous dramatic flesh wounds while continuing to fight vigorously. The thick layer of barley-fed fat protects your vital nerves and internal organs, keeping you alive for the next profitable show. You slowly realize that your own physical body is being meticulously engineered for maximum entertainment value and maximum biological survivability. Understanding this grim biological strategy fundamentally changes how you view the steaming bowl of tasteless mush. You aggressively scoop the thick barley into your mouth, forcing down every single bite with a newfound, grim. The coarse grains heavily scratch your throat, but you now recognize them as the literal building blocks of every single pound of soft fat you gain represents another crucial barrier between a sharp blade and your massive, heavily padded body will soon become a highly resilient canvas for the incredibly violent art of. As you wipe the sticky residue from your tired mouth, you feel the heavy, comforting weight of your new. You are no longer just a desperate debtor, but a scientifically managed biological asset, preparing for the ultimate. The morning sun slowly rises higher over the ludus, casting long, dramatic shadows across the heavily stained. You join the other bulky, formidable barley men, stepping onto the hot sand to begin another grueling. Your thick, powerful frame perfectly absorbs the harsh, punishing blows from heavy wooden training swords without sustaining any. The clever lanistas have successfully hacked human biology, turning cheap agricultural waste into an incredibly resilient, money-making. You breathe heavily, feeling the dense energy of the complex carbohydrates slowly fueling your exhausting, relentlessly repetitive march. In this deeply cynical world of commercialized slaughter, your carefully cultivated body fat is truly your most valuable. Long before the warm sun even breaches the high stone walls, a sharp iron whistle violently shatters your. You slowly drag your exhausted, aching body from the stiff hay mattress to begin the most mundane part. How do the greatest fighters of ancient Rome actually spend their early morning hours before the wealthy patrons? You might imagine glorious tactical planning, but the harsh reality involves grabbing a rough brush and heavy buckets of. Your raw, calloused hands angrily scrub the massive training floor to completely remove the stubborn blood and sweat. This grueling daily chore functions exactly like the tedious maintenance required in any massive commercial sports facility. The strict instructors demand absolute perfection in cleanliness to prevent nasty infections that could easily ruin their expensive human. With the exhausting cleaning finally finished, you quickly move into the dusty yard for your primary physical condition. Here is where it gets interesting, because the famous deadly iron swords are completely absent from this strictly controlled day. Instead, the relentless trainer hands you a heavily weighted wooden practice sword that feels incredibly awkward and surprisingly This dull wooden weapon is intentionally carved to be significantly heavier than the actual lethal iron blade you will Swinging this massive block of dense wood through the thick morning air forces your tired shoulder muscles to absolutely scream. The underlying logic is incredibly simple but highly effective for building explosive physical power over many long, agonizing months. When you finally hold a real metal weapon inside the arena, it will suddenly feel exactly as the blazing afternoon sun beats down mercilessly as you tirelessly repeat the exact same defensive footwork for several. You repeatedly strike a sturdy wooden post, practicing precise angles rather than engaging in wild, uncontrolled cinematic. This endless repetition deliberately builds deep muscle memory so you can react automatically when true mortal danger eventually. Despite the intense physical exhaustion, a strangely comforting sense of predictable safety heavily settles over this highly disciplined. Outside these thick walls, poor citizens constantly starve and desperately struggle against the chaotic economic forces of the. Inside this strict corporate compound, your daily survival is practically guaranteed as long as you closely follow the. You trade your personal freedom for the ultimate security of knowing exactly what every single tomorrow will consist. As the deep shadows lengthen, the strict training abruptly stops, and the collective mood slowly begins to. The exhausted fighters silently gather around the communal baths to carefully wash away the thick. You quietly share stories with men who were once absolute strangers, but are now your closest, most trusted professionals. There is a deep, unspoken bond forged through this monotonous shared suffering that completely transcends your former person. You slowly walk back to your tiny cell, your heavy muscles throbbing with the familiar dull ache of. This regulated existence might seem remarkably boring, but this quiet routine is the true foundation of your future. Tomorrow will bring the exact same grueling chores, slowly preparing your mind for the terrifying chaos of the loop. You quickly learn that this entire operation is carefully managed by Titus, You're remarkably strict and calculated. He runs this ancient training facility exactly like a highly profitable modern American sports franchise. The wealthy lanistas essentially act as billionaire team owners who trade expensive human lives for massive financial. Purchasing a promising new fighter might easily cost them around 50,000 sesterces in initial capital acquisition. However, a single spectacular victory in the grand arena can quickly generate over 200,000 sesterces. Titus ensures every single drop of your spilled blood directly translates into a massive return. This brutal environment strips away your humanity, transforming your physical existence into a highly valued commercial. The underlying economics of this bloody spectacle rely heavily on lucrative ancient sponsorships, mirroring modern corporate ambitious Roman politicians eagerly pay hundreds of thousands of silver coins to exclusively sponsor these incredibly They are desperately buying public favor and crucial votes by treating the roaring masses to extremely expensive. Your wealthy owner heavily capitalizes on this political desperation, negotiating massive appearance fees for his most elite professional gladiator. Stepping onto the hot sand is basically a walking billboard for a wealthy The politicians essentially rent your lethal skills to heavily promote their own personal brands to the. It is a remarkably cynical financial ecosystem where human suffering is simply another line item. But the real secret of this massive business empire will actually shock your modern understanding of commercial. You soon discover that the wealthy owners completely monetize absolutely every single physical aspect of your miserable. They do not merely sell the fleeting entertainment of your brutal combat to the bloodthirsty cheering rope. They have ingeniously developed a highly lucrative secondary market, focused entirely on extremely bizarre physical gladiator merch. After a grueling afternoon of intense training, slaves meticulously scrape your heavily oiled body using a curve. Every single drop of your filthy sweat and scraped dead skin is carefully collected into expensive. This disgusting biological mixture is then heavily processed and sold at an incredible premium to wealthy aristocrats. Rich Roman women enthusiastically pay thousands of sesterces to purchase your bottled sweat as an extremely expensive. They truly believe that rubbing this filthy athletic byproduct onto their smooth skin transfers your immense raw. Your bodily fluids are aggressively marketed as a powerful aphrodisiac, generating massive additional profits for even the weapons you use and the bloody sand you fall upon become highly monetized ancient souvenirs. If a brave fighter unfortunately perishes, his blood is sometimes collected and sold as a magical. Pieces of a shattered wooden shield or a bent iron helmet fetch ridiculous prices in the crowd. You realize you are essentially a heavily merchandised brand, generating endless passive income streams. This shocking level of total commercialization makes your desperate fight for survival feel incredibly cheap and deeply. While you are violently risking your life for a few meager copper coins, your sweat generates absolute. Titus carefully calculates these bizarre merchandising margins, ensuring the training school remains perfectly profitable regardless of your physical body is thoroughly commodified, acting exactly like a modern licensed property that generates continuous The wealthy aristocrats who loudly cheer for your bloody death are the same customers buying your bottled. This entire brutal industry thrives by completely packaging your deep personal suffering into a highly desirable luxury. Every single agonizing breath you take inside the ludus simply adds more precious value to their strain. Looking closely at the cold financial reality completely changes your emotional perspective on this deeply glorified. The glorious honor and legendary fame you dreamed of are just clever marketing tools designed to. You are essentially an underpaid independent contractor trapped completely inside a massive ruthlessly efficient, ancient corporates. Your wealthy owners are comfortably counting millions of sesterces while you sleep on a stiff, itchy. The roaring crowd simply views you as a thrilling seasonal product, carefully manufactured for their temporary after. You must smartly navigate this deeply cynical economy if you ever hope to actually purchase your. Understanding the cold mathematics of your own brutal exploitation is the very first crucial step to this massive financial empire thrives upon your daily sweat and eventual blood. You stand completely motionless in the suffocating darkness of the narrow staging tunnel beneath the heavy iron gate ahead is the only thing separating your quiet existence from the chaotic violence. You're breathing, your chest feels in sweat violently. Cold dread slowly creeps down your heavily armored spine as you grip your weapon with pure. You can actually smell the sharp metallic scent of fresh blood drifting in from the previous. The terrifying reality of your brutal contract is no longer just words on a distant piece of you are every single grueling day of eating tasteless barley and swinging heavy wooden practice swords has led exactly to this truly terrible. Now listen carefully, because here is where the entire psychological experience the muffled murmurs from the massive audience above slowly begin to build into an incredibly rhythmic terror. They are loudly stomping their feet, physically shaking the very stone foundations of the dark tunnel where dust gently falls from the ceiling, landing softly on your polished helmet. As the deafening noise grows significant, the heavy iron chains holding the massive wooden gate finally begin to loudly rattle, and slowly a brilliant, blinding slice of harsh afternoon sunlight aggressively pierces through the suffocating shadows of your cramped. The intense heat of the arena violently washes over your tense face like a blazing blast from a roar. The heavy gate, the deafening, chaotic roar of the crowd. It is an absolute physical wall of explosive sound that instantly rattles every single bone inside your extremely. 50,000 screaming Roman citizens are frantically cheering for the spectacular violence they are about to personally. The blinding glare of the bright afternoon sun completely overwhelms your vision as your leather sandals hit. You aggressively blink away the harsh light, slowly revealing the magnificent, terrifying scale of this enormous commercial This is grand theater. The sheer magnitude of the towering stone stands covered in rich fabrics, takes your fragile. You feel incredibly small, yet strangely empowered by the massive surge of raw adrenaline pumping furiously. Every single face in that massive roaring crowd is looking directly at you with hungry, merciless. You are no longer a desperate debtor struggling to survive in a forgotten, dusty, provincial. You are now the highly anticipated main attraction in the greatest, most expensive sporting franchise in the. Your heavy iron sword suddenly feels completely weightless, exactly as your strict trainers had promised during those endless. The thick layer of protective fat on your torso feels like a warm, incredibly secure shield of impenetrable bile. You take one deep, final breath of the dry arena air and slowly raise your gleaming. The massive crowd You stand in the blazing arena expecting a sudden brutal death at any given moment. Cinematic legends have firmly taught you that a simple thumbs down guarantees your immediate execution. You probably imagine every single fallen warrior being slaughtered mercilessly on this heavily blood-stained sand. Hollywood directors absolutely love showing a cruel emperor randomly deciding who lives and who dies. This popular narrative creates a thrilling, dramatic illusion of completely lawless and chaotic ancient slaughter. But the actual historical reality of your impending combat is surprisingly different and heavily regulated. Here is where it gets interesting, regarding the ultimate fate of a defeated Roman gladiator. You notice a stern man standing nearby wearing a pristine white tunic and holding a long wooden staff. This commanding official is the Summa Rudis, a highly respected senior referee enforcing strict combat rules. He's usually a wealthy, retired veteran fighter who intimately understands the extreme dangers of the bloody arena. His primary job is absolutely not to encourage mindless murder for the roaring, bloodthirsty crowds. The strict referee exists specifically to ensure a fair fight and prevent unnecessary fatal injuries. When you clash swords with your fierce opponent, you immediately notice his heavily restricted movements. You are both carefully following complex, legally binding rules of engagement established by your wealthy owners. If a fighter becomes severely injured or hopelessly trapped, the vigilant referee immediately stops the match. He firmly uses his long wooden staff to physically separate the exhausted, heavily bleeding ancient warriors. This sudden intervention actively prevents a fatal blow from destroying an incredibly valuable human financial asset. The intense fighting stops instantly, completely shattering the modern myth of endless, unregulated, brutal gladiatorial murder. You must remember that your powerful lanista paid an absolute fortune to acquire and train you. Losing a highly skilled warrior in a random local exhibition match is a catastrophic financial disaster. If you are accidentally killed during standard combat, the event sponsor must pay massive financial penalties. The wealthy politician organizing these grand games would be forced to completely reimburse your expensive owner. This hefty death compensation fee could easily bankrupt a deeply ambitious Roman aristocrat seeking public office. Therefore, absolutely everyone involved strongly prefers that both skilled fighters survive to entertain another profitable day. This ancient business structure closely resembles the massive guaranteed contracts in modern American professional sports leagues. Consider the extreme financial protections surrounding a superstar quarterback in the NFL or an NBA legend. Billionaire franchise owners implement extremely strict injury protocols to heavily protect their most expensive athletic investments. You are essentially the ancient equivalent of a highly protected, incredibly valuable modern American sports superstar. The rigorous refereeing system acts exactly like those complex modern insurance policies, protecting massive corporate assets. Your life is preserved simply because your continued survival guarantees future revenue for the greedy franchise. When you finally disarm your exhausted opponent, he does not passively wait for a brutal execution. He raises a single tired finger toward the bright sky to officially signal his honorable surrender. The Summa Rudis quickly steps between you both, immediately halting the intense physical violence right there. The ultimate decision rests with the event editor, but they almost always choose to grant mercy. Sparing a brave, heavily wounded fighter is actually considered a magnificent display of noble political generosity. The roaring crowd wildly cheers for a spectacular display of martial skill, rather than senseless death. You slowly lower your heavy iron sword, feeling an immense wave of profound physical relief wash over you. The defeated man breathes heavily in the hot sand, knowing he will definitely survive this terrifying ordeal today. Statistically, nearly 9 out of 10 professional gladiators actually walk away alive from their brutal arena engagements. This incredibly high survival rate fundamentally changes how you perceive your dangerous role in this massive spectacle. It is fundamentally a theatrical display of extreme physical endurance rather than a guaranteed ancient death sentence. You wipe the salty sweat from your tired brow, acknowledging your brave opponent with a respectful nod. The incredibly strict rules of the arena carefully protect you from the wild chaos of actual warfare. You are participating in a beautifully choreographed dance of violence managed by extremely cautious, wealthy financial investors. This surprising historical truth instantly lifts a massive psychological weight from your heavily burdened, deeply exhausted shoulders. Surviving the dangerous games is absolutely not a rare miracle, but the expected outcome of normal labor. You will safely return to your quiet stone cell tonight, eagerly preparing for your next, highly profitable performance. The heavy adrenaline slowly fades as strong hands carry you into the dimly lit, chaotic medical wing. A completely overwhelming scent of sharp vinegar and spilled blood immediately and violently assaults your exhausted senses. You lay heavily on a cold marble slab while intense throbbing pain radiates from your deeply slashed shoulder. What happened next will surprise you regarding the true quality of your mandatory ancient emergency healthcare. You might naturally expect dirty, ignorant butchers carelessly hacking away at your terribly infected, gaping open wounds. Instead, you are remarkably surrounded by some of the absolute finest, most highly educated surgical physicians in Rome. These incredibly elite surgeons meticulously wash your deep lacerations using strong astringent wine and soothing crushed medicinal herbs. The incredibly sharp, biting sting of the pungent herbal mixture makes your tired muscles involuntarily and violently spasm. They quickly pack the bleeding muscle with fresh spider webs to powerfully coagulate the steadily flowing crimson blood. Expert hands swiftly thread a bone needle, skillfully stitching your torn flesh with surprisingly delicate, highly practiced precision. This advanced medical care is incredibly expensive, perfectly matching the premium treatments given to wealthy Roman aristocratic senators. Your wealthy owner fiercely protects his expensive human property by strictly employing the absolute best available medical science. As the dedicated doctors finish their bloody work, your strict Dr. Titus suddenly steps out from the shadows, strictly minus the incredibly expensive cost of these premium imported healing herbs. You slowly turn your sweaty head, eagerly listening to the beautiful clinking sound of silver sesterces resting inside. That incredibly heavy pouch physically represents another crucial step toward permanently paying off your massive, suffocating financial debts. Despite the agonizing, burning pain constantly radiating through your freshly stitched shoulder, a profound sense of safety washes over you. You have successfully survived the brutal arena today, rightfully earning both your continued life and your highly anticipated wages. This brutal corporate system actually actively rewards your physical suffering with highly competent medical attention and immediate financial compensation. The bitter, metallic taste of medicinal opium slowly begins to numb your tired tongue and your deeply aching muscles. This powerful liquid gently drags your exhausted mind toward a deeply peaceful, perfectly painless, and incredibly long, dreamless sleep. In this strange, highly commercialized world of spectacular ancient violence, elite medical care remains your greatest, unexpected, comforting luxury. You are never treated like a highly disposable piece of absolute garbage thrown away after a single violent use. Instead, you are meticulously repaired and carefully polished exactly like a highly valuable, incredibly expensive modern professional sports car. Every single silver coin inside that heavy pouch violently reminds you exactly why you signed that terrible dark contract. You finally close your incredibly heavy eyes, deeply comforted by the cold silver resting safely on the nearby table. As your freshly stitched shoulder finally stops throbbing, a heavily scarred veteran fighter quietly approaches your small bed. You might naturally assume that these deadly professional killers harbor deep personal hatred for their daily arena rivals. Hollywood blockbusters often portray ancient gladiators as intensely lonely wolves, constantly plotting to brutally murder everyone around them. However, the absolute truth regarding your dark communal living situation reveals a remarkably beautiful and unexpected human connection. Here is where it gets interesting regarding the hidden social structures existing completely outside the bloody, sandy arena. The scarred veteran gently hands you a small clay cup filled with heavily watered wine to soothe your pain. He calmly explains that every single fighter in this training school absolutely must join their secret internal society. This strictly organized fraternity is officially known to the weary ancient fighters as the powerful local gladiator collegia. You are immediately introduced to an incredibly supportive underground brotherhood designed specifically to protect its highly vulnerable members. You must contribute a specific percentage of your freshly earned silver coins into a highly protected, shared communal fund. This mandatory financial contribution functions exactly like paying regular monthly dues to a powerful modern American labor union. By pooling your meager financial resources together, the desperately poor fighters finally gain significant and crucial collective bargaining power. Your wealthy franchise owner can no longer easily exploit your extreme individual vulnerability during the grueling, unprofitable winter off-season. This shared financial security fundamentally shifts the delicate psychological balance of power within the dark, suffocating stone training walls. This ancient labor union strongly mirrors the historical struggles of brave American factory workers fighting intense corporate greed. Just like modern steelworkers demanding basic human rights, these ancient fighters fiercely protect their own marginalized professional community. The wealthy political elites absolutely despise this hidden organization because it gives mere human property extremely dangerous collective strength. Yet the greedy franchise owners secretly tolerate the union because it significantly boosts overall fighter morale and daily productivity. A securely protected, financially stable gladiator is ultimately much more highly profitable than a desperately anxious, completely starving slave. The most crucial practical benefit of joining this ancient fraternity is obtaining guaranteed, comprehensive life insurance coverage today. In ancient Roman culture, being carelessly thrown into an unmarked mass grave was considered a truly horrifying eternal fate. The collegia strictly guarantees that every single fallen brother receives a completely honorable, highly respectful, and properly funded burial ceremony. They strategically use the shared union funds to purchase proper stone markers, celebrating the specific arena achievements of the deceased. Knowing your physical body will be treated with absolute dignity significantly reduces the immense psychological terror of violently dying. This deeply compassionate brotherhood also serves as a remarkably reliable social safety net for your highly vulnerable remaining dependents. If a skilled fighter unfortunately perishes during a brutal match, his deeply grieving family is absolutely never completely abandoned. The labor union diligently uses the collected communal funds to directly financially support his newly widowed, deeply desperate wife. They actively provide crucial money to ensure the surviving children never starve in the unforgiving, brutally cold Roman streets. This guaranteed financial protection brings immense emotional comfort to brave men who literally risk their lives every single afternoon. You slowly sip the watered wine, feeling an overwhelming wave of profound emotional warmth beautifully spread through your chest. The incredibly fierce warriors who aggressively strike you during practice are essentially your deeply committed, highly reliable life insurance policy. This extremely violent environment surprisingly fosters one of the most remarkably caring social support systems in recorded ancient history. You are no longer just a desperately isolated debtor, fighting entirely alone against a massively cruel, wealthy corporate machine. You have successfully discovered profound human empathy, completely hidden deeply within the darkest corners of this incredibly deadly enterprise. Your perspective on your fellow fighters radically shifts from natural suspicion to unconditional fraternal trust. When you confidently step onto the bloody sand tomorrow, you will fight alongside men who genuinely care about you. They will fiercely strike your wooden shield to deeply entertain the roaring crowd, while secretly ensuring your ultimate biological survival. This remarkably powerful unspoken bond absolutely transforms the terrifying arena into a deeply cooperative, highly calculated daily theatrical performance space. The highly structured shared labor union transforms these deadly rivals into a truly united family, fiercely protecting its own members. This beautiful historical irony proves that the deadliest ancient warriors were incredibly compassionate souls, safely guarding their chosen brothers. Years slowly pass inside the grueling training school as you meticulously execute your brutal commercial contracts. Every spectacular victory steadily adds more heavy silver coins to your growing personal financial savings. Your massively bruised body carries numerous thick scars, telling stories of countless highly profitable arena performances. You essentially functioned as an extremely durable corporate asset, generating immense wealth for your greedy owners. But the real secret is how you carefully managed your own terrifyingly dangerous professional athletic career. Instead of wildly seeking deadly glory, you fought with cold calculation to absolutely ensure your survival. You treated this bloody spectacle simply as an extremely hazardous blue-collar job, requiring supreme physical discipline. That pragmatic approach perfectly allowed you to gradually accumulate enough wealth to finally buy your freedom. The glorious day finally arrives when you walk into the dark office of your strict lanista. You proudly drop a massive, incredibly heavy sack of silver directly onto his polished wooden desk. This tremendous final payment completely clears the massive original debt that brutally forced you into servitude. The calculating owner quietly counts the gleaming coins before officially dissolving your highly restrictive labor contract. He formally presents you with the legendary rudies, a simple wooden sword symbolizing your absolute freedom. This remarkably plain wooden object holds significantly more immense value than any beautifully crafted iron weapon. It officially proves you have successfully survived the incredibly violent meat grinder of the Roman entertainment industry. Holding that smooth wood brings a profound, overwhelming wave of immense psychological relief washing over you. You slowly walk out through the heavy iron gates of the ludus for the very last time. The deafening roar of the massive amphitheater crowd completely fades into the quiet, peaceful city background. You are no longer a legally bound physical commodity, desperately fighting for the daily amusement of others. Your heavy steps feel incredibly light as you leave that highly commercialized arena of death far behind. This specific moment feels exactly like finally paying off a massive, suffocating 30-year mortgage against all odds. You have successfully reclaimed your personal sovereignty from a ruthlessly efficient, wildly profitable ancient sports monopoly. The terrifying nightmares of flashing blades and bloody sand slowly begin to lose their firm, psychological grip. You take a deep breath of genuinely free air, savoring the exceptionally sweet taste of ultimate victory. The long journey back to your quiet provincial town is filled with immense hope and quiet anticipation. Your hardened hands gently reach into your worn tunic to touch that familiar small, wooden carved statue. It served as your crucial emotional anchor during countless terrifying nights locked inside that dark stone cell. When you finally push open your own wooden front door, your beautiful wife is waiting right there. Her warm, comforting tears completely wash away the heavy, psychological burdens you carried for so many years. You have successfully returned to the peaceful, remarkably quiet civilian life you fought so incredibly hard to protect. The dangerous gamble paid off, completely restoring your dignity and securing a financially stable future together. That simple wooden rudies now rests proudly on your mantle as a permanent symbol of your survival. Your personal story of survival represents just one fleeting moment within a massive historical timeline. The grand gladiatorial games continued dominating Roman culture for nearly 7 long, incredibly bloody centuries. However, this deeply entrenched corporate entertainment machine eventually faced a slow and remarkably inevitable decline. By the 4th century, the massive Roman Empire was aggressively crumbling under severe economic pressures. Maintaining these incredibly expensive gladiatorial schools became a completely unsustainable financial burden for wealthy politicians. A rapidly changing religious landscape also began heavily shifting the moral compass of regular citizens. The glorious era of highly regulated ancient blood sports was quietly drawing to an unceremonious close. The final devastating blow to this massive industry officially arrived in the year 404. Emperor Honorius issued a strict legal decree completely banning all gladiatorial combat throughout the vast empire. The sprawling training schools were immediately shut down, completely displacing thousands of highly skilled professional fighters. The magnificent Colosseum, which once seated 50,000 roaring spectators, was slowly abandoned and heavily looted. Its glorious marble facade was aggressively stripped away to build basic churches and mundane residential houses. Over several quiet decades, nature slowly reclaimed the heavily blood-stained sand where legendary corporate athletes once stood. The greatest commercial sports franchise in ancient history simply faded away into dusty, forgotten archaeological ruins. What happened next will surprise you regarding how our modern society perfectly remembers these ancient warriors. As centuries passed, the cold historical truth of complex labor unions and careful biological engineering vanished. The pragmatic financial reality of professional gladiators was entirely replaced by wildly sensationalized, highly romanticized fiction. Modern storytellers preferred tales of endless brutal slaughter rather than calculating businessmen protecting expensive athletic investments. We aggressively stripped away their complex humanity to create perfectly simple, incredibly violent, cinematic historical caricatures. The carefully regulated sporting events were completely rewritten into chaotic spectacles of absolute, unyielding mortal terror. The true legacy of the arena was essentially hijacked by our own modern thirst for entertainment. When legendary Hollywood studios began producing massive summer blockbusters, they completely ignored the boring administrative facts. Epic cinematic masterpieces like Spartacus and Gladiator heavily capitalized on the myth of continuous, senseless murder. Audiences sitting in air-conditioned American theaters desperately wanted to see highly rebellious heroes defeating evil emperors. They definitely did not want to watch heavily unionized athletes carefully following strict referee guidelines. The silver screen successfully transformed these pragmatic ancient businessmen into overly dramatic, heavily muscled mythical martyrs. Our modern pop culture heavily relies on creating extreme emotional stakes to sell expensive movie tickets. Therefore, the incredibly complex Roman sporting reality was sacrificed entirely to create highly profitable cinematic illusions. There is a profound sense of historical melancholy when you finally uncover the absolute factual truth. We completely erased the deeply inspiring story of desperate men organizing labor unions to survive poverty. By transforming them into mindless cinematic killing machines, we fundamentally disrespected their incredible daily professional struggles. These brave men meticulously calculated their financial odds while desperately fighting to feed their starving families. They were highly skilled ancient professionals navigating a brutally oppressive economic system with remarkable human dignity. Their true historical legacy is actually far more fascinating than any dramatic fiction Hollywood could invent. It's incredibly tragic that their genuine human experiences remain buried beneath layers of cinematic exaggeration. Today, millions of curious tourists walk through the silent, crumbling stone corridors of the massive Colosseum. They eagerly snap countless digital photographs while actively imagining the wildly inaccurate movie scenes they love. They look down at the exposed subterranean tunnels without understanding the incredible financial bureaucracy operating there. The incredibly wealthy lanistas and highly organized medical teams are completely absent from their modern imaginations. We effortlessly consume their ancient suffering through the incredibly distorted lens of massive contemporary entertainment media. The genuine voices of those barley-eating warriors are tragically lost within the deafening echoes of time. We have essentially replaced their authentic historical identities with beautifully packaged, highly consumable pop culture myths. The true story of the Roman arena is ultimately a deeply poignant reflection on human memory. We naturally prefer comfortable cinematic fantasies over the incredibly mundane, highly structured reality of historical life. Those ancient fighters were regular working people desperately trying to safely survive an incredibly difficult world. Recognizing their true corporate struggles makes their distant lives feel remarkably close to our modern reality. History always reveals that the absolute truth is infinitely more compelling than any manufactured Hollywood spectacle. When we finally strip away the heavily romanticized Hollywood myths and the ancient dust, a remarkably clear reflection surprisingly emerges. The disciplined ancient gladiator is ultimately not so incredibly different from the desperately exhausted modern American working citizen. Every single morning, you wake up long before the sun rises to step bravely into your own commercialized corporate arena. You constantly navigate the crushing pressures of expensive monthly mortgages, rising healthcare costs, and deeply suffocating credit card debt. You willingly sacrifice your precious personal time and your physical energy to carefully navigate a heavily structured, highly demanding economic machine. We endure these incredibly exhausting daily battles simply because we all have someone precious waiting for us at home. Just like those ancient fighters who consumed barley, your ultimate goal is rarely spectacular glory, but simply the peaceful survival of your family. You form strong professional bonds with your trusted colleagues, creating your own modern support networks to survive the ruthless corporate grind. The profound historical solidarity found within those ancient stone training walls perfectly mirrors our own desperate human need for collective communal security. Whether swinging a heavy wooden practice sword or typing endlessly on a modern keyboard, the fundamental human struggle remains incredibly consistent. We are all essentially fighting for our own symbolic wooden sword, that beautiful distant promise of ultimate financial and personal freedom. The incredibly brave men who bled on the hot Roman sand were simply doing whatever was absolutely necessary to survive their harsh circumstances. Their deeply poignant historical legacy reminds us that true heroism is almost never found in chaotic, wildly celebrated cinematic violence. Genuine courage is found in the remarkably quiet, intensely unyielding daily resilience required to consistently provide for the people you love. Every single time you swallow your deep personal exhaustion to finish another grueling shift, you actively honor their beautifully pragmatic ancient spirit. Our modern world is undeniably filled with entirely different systemic challenges, but the heavy weight of financial responsibility feels exactly the same. You do not need to shed actual blood to understand the immense psychological toll of dedicating your life to a demanding system. The wealthy lanistas of the ancient world have simply been replaced by the massive, faceless billionaire corporations dominating our current modern economy. Yet despite the overwhelming power of those massive institutions, the enduring strength of the common worker still quietly and successfully prevails. As the deep shadows of the quiet night finally begin to softly envelop your incredibly tired, heavily burdened modern mind, completely let go. The deafening, chaotic roar of your own demanding daily arena can safely wait for the bright, revealing light of another distant morning. You have successfully survived all the intensely stressful professional battles and exhausting financial challenges that this particular day aggressively threw at you. There is absolutely no more demanding labor required from your deeply aching muscles or your intensely racing, highly overstimulated modern thoughts tonight. Allow the comforting silence of your quiet bedroom to gently wash away the thick, accumulated grime of your own difficult daily struggles. You have rightfully earned this precious, incredibly restorative moment of absolute peace, far away from the relentlessly demanding eyes of the crowd. Let the heavy, suffocating weight of your personal responsibilities slowly melt into the soft, welcoming embrace of your warm, highly protective blankets. It is a remarkably beautiful story we continue living, surviving our own unique arenas to gracefully protect the precious family waiting at home. Thank you for quietly joining me on this incredibly long, deeply fascinating historical journey beneath the blood-stained sand of the ancient Roman amphitheater. I sincerely wish you a remarkably calm, peaceful night, completely free from the terrifying shadows of whatever tomorrow might eventually bring. When you picture the legendary Library of Alexandria, you likely imagine peaceful scholars reading quiet scrolls. You probably envision a magical sanctuary where ancient philosophers gently gathered knowledge for the greater good. But what if this beautiful romantic illusion hides a deeply ruthless intellectual war fueled by absolute greed? The hidden truth completely destroys that peaceful image of harmonious ancient academic cooperation. You are about to discover how the ancient world actually weaponized human knowledge. You are 20 years old, completely exhausted by the relentless, suffocating grind of modern hustle culture. Every single day feels exactly like running desperately through a massive, overwhelmingly crowded American shopping mall. The glaring neon signs constantly scream at you to consume more meaningless products and superficial content. You are desperately searching for true, lasting wisdom in a completely frantic society obsessed with rapid profits. This deeply frustrating cultural emptiness pushes your tired mind to seek refuge in the distant ancient past. You imagine escaping this endless modern rat race by walking toward the greatest center of ancient learning. You truly believe finding this magnificent ancient library will finally provide the quiet intellectual peace you crave.